Well, anything and everything we had planned to do on this week's show just got put in an incredible blender about 2 hours ago when the club announced that Greg Vanney had stepped down as Toronto FC head coach. We thought we'd be talking about the end of the season on this week's edition of Wake the Red Weekly presented by Footy Talks. Instead, we're talking about the end of an era. My name is Mitchell Tierney. Today, we'll react to the shocking Greg Vanney departure news, talk Toronto FC's other end-of-season roster changes, off-season priorities, Iowa Canola's international future, and so much more. John Molinaro will stop by in a half an hour to bring us the latest on Voyageurs FC's Concacaf League preparation, as well as they prepare for a very big fixture for them tonight. But let's not waste any more time setting the stage because there's a lot of drama that still needs to be played on in this week's show. Michael, Jeff, how you guys doing?
Hold on, Mitch. You're not getting anywhere without talking about your scarf right now. Come on, talk to me.
I mean, had to pay tribute to the gaffer. Had to pay tribute to Greg Vanney on his last day, I guess, as Toronto FC head coach. It's also very cold in this room, so that played a tiny part of it as well. I don't know if we forgot to pay the hydro bill, but
we got
mainly
some snow outside.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's tough to put into words what this day means for Toronto FC fans, Toronto FC players, and Toronto FC as a whole. Because Greg Vanney was synonymous with Toronto FC's success. In 2014, when they started to turn the page, it was Greg Vanney who was leading that charge. And, we'll shout out Martin Bailey early, just a fun stat. Greg Vanney has 28 more wins than all of the other Toronto FC coaches combined. Add them all up. Every other coach before Greg Vanney, I believe there's 8 of them. Combine all of those wins, and you have 28 less than what Greg Vanney managed to achieve in his, 6 years of being at Toronto FC.
Mm-hmm.
His loss is one that will hurt immensely. His loss is one that will be felt for a few years. And it's a sad day for Toronto FC fans, supporters. It's just all around. It's a sad day. I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on what the move was.
What are thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the 28 wins. Like, that's not like something that's going to be broken next season either. Like, that'll take a couple of years for the next manager in combination with all the other managers to break down. But yeah, the legacy for Vanni speaks for itself. I mean, as you said, more wins than all the other Toronto FC coaches combined. MLS Cup, Supporters Shield, 3 conference championships, 3 Voyageurs Cups, MLS and CONCACAF Coach of the Year. Most importantly, 4-time Trillium Cup champion. Jeff,
what, Mitch? No,
to add?
No,
Jeff's not a happy
really.
Camper.
No.
There's way too much to unpack. I mean, I need to preface that I don't think I'm capable of anything but a hot take today, so bear that in mind. Right, I know Michael was at the press conference, and like I said, I have a lot of questions, and while we were leading into going live, he said he had a lot of the answers. So I am just as curious as everybody else to hear what he has to say right now.
Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Jeff, and that was the position Toronto FC were in, I guess, a few weeks ago. And that was when Greg Vanney was, talking to media, telling us that the deal was pretty much all but done. And not only that, the very next day, you had Bill Manning on 590 radio. He was talking about how he had a glass of wine with Greg Vanney that very night and how they're inching closer. Ali Curtis echoed those same sentiments. So I guess that real question is what happened between 6 weeks ago when TFC were in contention at the, they're in first in the Supporters Shield race to now, where Greg Vanney has decided to step down from the club. What I will say is just Greg Vanney in this press conference it sounded like him telling media that the deal was really close. It almost sounded like that was a little bit strategic. What we learned was Toronto FC, they were doing everything they could to sign Greg Vanney. It was just a matter of putting pen to paper, right? It wasn't a numbers issue. It wasn't about the amount of years he was getting. It wasn't about the amount of money that he was getting. At the end of the day, it was going to come down to Greg Vanney and Greg Vanney alone. He had an offer on the table since July. I'm not sure if it was a blank check or whatever it was, but regardless, money wasn't the issue. He took his time with that decision, perhaps with the idea of potentially even leaving in the back of his mind, but he took his time to make that decision. And, you know, he let us know today that it was honestly a little bit strategic of him to sort of let the media know that a deal was close, just to take that pressure off of, you know, the club as they're going towards the postseason. So I don't think this is a decision that Vanni has known for a while. I think it's a possibility that he knew for a while. I mean, his contract was up at the end of the year. It's something we've been talking about since the beginning of the year. But I do think it, like I said, he knew it was a possibility, and then I guess all the dominoes fell into place, and Greg Vanney decided to take the high road there. Yeah, what other questions do you guys have? I'll see if I can do my best to answer, because there's a bunch to take away from that interview.
I'm almost afraid to go down the dark path of the rabbit hole.
Send it.
You know, how do I put this? We saw this with Seba in 2018, where his pursuit of an individual. There's my fire alarm, guys. Bring the chaos.
How hot the take's about to be.
I just want to know how long he knew. And then that naturally leads to what was the knock-on effect of that in terms of the team's performance, in terms of relationships in the locker room, in terms of any kind of responsibility, in terms of the center holding. You know, I don't say it lightly, but we can agree that Seba introduced almost a cancer to the TFC locker room in 2018. And it was only after he had left that little detail started to surmise about how much it affected everything. I have to look at the Vanni situation under the same context. And if he did know that much in advance, you know, did he take his foot off the gas? Mike, you made an interesting tweet that I collected in what's going to be a 4,000 page long Twitter social media wrap up post that will drop on WTR later. Thanks for the assignment. It was so much non-fun. And what was your take? Maybe playing in East Hartford plays into it. Maybe the possibility of playing in East Hartford next year plays into it. It's all on the table, man. There's way too much to unpack. You know, it's way too fresh. Like 2 hours ago, I think we were all like, "Are we actually doing a show today?" Because the most we could muster was dropping F-bombs in a group chat. So, it's all open. It's open season. It's open silly season on figuring out what the hell just happened.
Yeah, what I will say is between the Seba situation and the Vanni situation, I think the main difference is that Vanni's leaving under his own terms. Vanni's leaving at a time where he wanted to leave. Him and his family, they discussed, and they decided, you know, now is the right time to leave. And it wasn't because of money. It wasn't because of what Toronto FC were offer. It's because it was a bunch of different reasons that he set out. He mentioned that he was a builder. So was there building left to be done at Toronto FC now, or are there other projects perhaps that are more intriguing to him now? And you know, there's a lot of factors that go into it. But again, it's different than Seba, that I would say, because Seba hurt in ways that, like, in franchise altering ways, Seba hurt. Like when Seba departed Toronto FC, that was the end of an era. I think the same note, it is an end of an era for Greg Vanney, but a star player I think has a little bit more impact than a head coach, in my opinion. How do you guys feel about that?
Mike, I hope you are 1,000,000% right. This is for you, buddy.
I hope I am too, but how do you guys feel about that? I'm interested. Is star player leaving versus a head coach?
I don't know if I necessarily agree.
With what? I mean, we've gone in 1,000 different directions over time.
That's fair. No, well,
yeah.
I mean, with the head coach being less important than a star player, just because I don't know, the system and the culture that Vanni instituted here carried on past Seba. I mean, they got to another MLS Cup. It was never quite the same, but I don't think that's necessarily Seba's departure that was the full cause of that. And I did just want to mention on the Seba Vanni sort of comparison on their ouster. The one thing that I think makes a big difference is how public it was. Again, you said Greg Vanney tried to, like, even if he wasn't sure whether he was coming back, he tried to downplay that in the media, whereas Seba very much
no, Mitch, that's rose-colored glasses. I remember Seba did a sit down with KJ and Josie like 2 weeks before I was on Vocal Minority, and we were, when I guested on Vocal Minority, we were talking about the potential of him leaving, and it was the same as when Mike shot me down for bringing up the Vanni to LA Galaxy rumors like 2-3 weeks ago. Like, it's never going to happen. It was that shocking. It was only after 2018 ended and we started to hear about Greg Vanderveel and then people started to get a lot less guarded about what was going, and we still don't know the whole story, but we definitely got the impression that Seba was putting himself on a pedestal above and beyond the needs of the club in pursuit of his own ends.
Right. Now, so there was a disagreement there, right? Between Seba and the club. There's no disagreement here between Greg Vanney and the club. Let's just make that perfectly clear.
Sure, but there was a disconnect between how far. Listen, if I know I'm leaving a job in 6 months, I'm not giving it 100% anymore, and I think that's
unfair for you to say that he knew that he was leaving.
I'm just saying what I'm seeing from the tweets suggests that this wasn't like he didn't make a decision yesterday. He's been thinking about it all year, and thinking about it all year. The words "thinking about it all year."
Hold on, let me stop you there. He told me that the decision was ultimately made at the end of the season, after TFC were eliminated. He sat down, spoke to his family, and they decided that was when they came to that conclusion. It was a possibility. Of course,
absolutely sucks. That absolutely sucks. I'd almost rather that it was a preordained thing than him going, we crashed out in the first round. Screw these guys, because that's kind of what listen, hot takes. I'm incapable of anything else, guys. I'm here to bring the fire. But how can you not see it that way? Right? Either it was a going concern in his head for 5-6 months, which means that he was operating, there was something in the cortex that wasn't achieving success with TFC, right? There was some niggling doubt that manifested itself in a universe of other niggling doubts and just became a snowball of niggling doubts. But if the decision was made after we crashed out, boy, howdy,
So what, you'd want him to leave midway through a pandemic season where they're in Hartford because he doesn't want to finish this year with Toronto FC? Like,
Mitch, I don't know the answers. These are hot takes. That's why they're called hot.
That's fair, but I don't know. I think the way he left kind of leaves the club in the best situation it could be. I mean, it's like a week after the season's done. The season isn't technically even done in an MLS greater context. So this leaves the club with plenty of time to find a replacement, to work through all of these different things. If he had left, at any other time or even announced again that he was leaving at the end of the season, like the distractions, and there were already a ton of them this year, would have been incredibly high.
Yeah, and I also I also don't think this is the last piece of news we're going to hear from Toronto FC, perhaps even today. I just got word that Bill Manning and Ali Curtis are going to speak to media shortly. So we'll see what comes of that as well. But obviously they're going to talk a lot about Vanni and what he meant. But I'm interested to find out a lot more about that, because there's a ton of TFC content to get to beyond just Greg Vanney today. Obviously that's the biggest news, and rightfully so, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes in Toronto FC right now.
Yeah, I did also want to mention Joshua Cloak of The Athletic reporting that Dan Kalishman, who's another assistant in that Greg Vanney coaching staff, probably on his way out as well. So you never fully expect the entire coaching staff to stay together when there's a new head coach in. Usually they like to have their deputies that come in as well, but there's confirmation on that it won't probably just be Vanni on his way out right now. But yeah, I guess we'll put a stopper in that conversation for now. There's so much more we could get into there, but there, as Michael said, I mean, we were already tight for time before this Greg Vanney news.
Before you
even
wrap
happened.
up there, I want to tell the one Greg Vanney story that I tweeted out there a little bit. That was Greg. It was his own personal story, and he was asked. I forget how the Vanni out crowd was sort of weaved into it, but he was asked sort of what it means to walk away from Toronto FC after, you know, a bunch of successful years. And he recalled the story during his first game when he was walking out, and there was a group of fans behind him, and they yelled, his very first game, they yelled to him, "I hope that he's renting." Obviously, 6 years later, that wasn't the case, and I think those fans have kind of come around. But when Greg Vanney first arrived in Toronto, he wasn't welcome with open arms. This was a new sort of head coach that a lot of people were skeptical about, and rightfully so with the past that the team had. But he defied everything that we've known before that, and he set a different standard for the level of coaching at Toronto FC. So just, you know, to hear that little anecdote from him, just to see it come full circle, I think that just says wonders.
just shrugs. Yeah, I guess let's move on to the other players who potentially might be leaving. Of course, with any options declined, that sort of thing, there's no guarantee that these players will be leaving. And Toronto FC have already said that they are hoping to reach out to Pablo Piatti, who is the main one, the headliner on the list, if you will, his management and the player himself, to see if they can get a deal done. But he won't be coming back as a designated player next season. That much we know for sure. Let's discuss that a little bit, obviously, because I think I fired out a tweet that maybe was a little bit of a hot take after the Toronto FC exit to Nashville. That maybe felt like I was singling out Piatti a little bit. I that's never the case. I'm very big on the player and very big on his abilities and what he brought to the team this season. And again, he's the only maybe starting quality MLS winger on Toronto FC right now at this moment. Again, as we've said a million times, I think Jaden Nelson gets there maybe even as soon as the start of next season. But with that being said, I don't know that he put up enough this season to be considered a designated player. You need game breakers as designated players, and I don't think Piatti's quite a game breaker in MLS. I think he's a player that helps the team a lot, but be a game breaker.
Yeah, let's talk about Toronto FC's roster itself right now. They're at 28 out of 30 players after making all of those roster decisions. So that leaves 2 open roster spots. Now, we did lose Mitch for just a second. That's all right. I'll keep going. Those 2 roster spots that Toronto FC have to fill, they have no left back right now. You know, you have Aro and Richard Luria who can kind of sort of play there, but both Tony Gallacher and Justin Morrow are right now out of contract. Again, there's only 2 spots on TFC's roster right now. The Reds also lost both of their center backs, their backup center backs, in Lawrence Simon and Eric Zavaleta. So there's your 3rd and 4th string center backs who are, again, no longer on the roster with, again, 2 roster spots to fill. You also have to use one of those roster spots on a designated player. So let's make it 1 roster spot to fill. And you have all of those holes right now. So what we're going to see, obviously there are workarounds to this. So what we're going to see is maybe even some trades. But I think more likely is we're going to see their young players get loaned out again. That ultimately does free up a roster spot, giving them some room. But right now, again, 28 out of 30 players, there's not much wiggle room for Toronto FC to play with right now. And they have to really assess what their biggest needs are. Is it a center back? Is it a left back? Is it another winger? Like what does this team really, really need? For me, for sure, you have to get a left back.
I think regardless of what coach we hire, we need a left back, right? In terms of wingers, we can throw the pursuit of the 4-3-3 Guardiola Tam winger out with the Greg father, I think, and we need to be adaptable for whatever new coach, new hotness brings in terms of how he wants to set up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they'll be going after a designated player winger. I'm fairly confident in saying that, unless they can kind of swing a deal and acquire a really sturdy, MLS caliber winger. I think the winger has to be the biggest priority there, especially if you're not bringing back Piatti. Another thing I want to mention on that Piatti sort of note is Toronto FC have set the bar with Pablo Piatti, declining Pablo Piatti's contract, meaning they saw what Piatti gave last year. We've been on the show saying he was our best winger. He was very good in his time with MLS. He developed a great relationship with Alejandro Pozuelo. But for them to move on past Piatti now signifies just how good of a player they're hoping for in their designated player. And for me, that should be exciting for a Toronto FC fan, because I think there's not many of us who would have blinked twice if the team re-upped Pablo Piatti and, brought him back as a designated player. I think a lot of us would have been comfortable with that because of the body of work that he did show us. But the fact they're moving on from him again, I that's exciting from a Toronto FC fan perspective.
The only reason I would have been happy with him back in 2021 is because of external concerns with respect to the transfer market and the state of the world with the pandemic. I have a question, and I already know the answer, but I just want to make sure we understand the context while we're discussing Pablo. So they've declined the option to bring him back at the same money they were paying him last season, right? Which means that he's eligible for the MLS reentry draft, and any other team can take him. But that does not mean that they can't still negotiate with him and potentially get him down on a cheaper deal, right? Am I correct there?
So they can renegotiate right now, and the hope is that he'd be willing to come back on a cheaper deal. Obviously, not a designated player.
Not a designated player. Do we know any behind the scenes information? Do we know if he was approached with the potential to re-up on TAM, and he said, "No, I want to be a DP in this league"? Like,
no, we're not sure. We haven't heard about like whether or not he was approached by that. But what we have heard is Ali Curtis and Piatti's side, his camp, they're having ongoing negotiations.
Are they sitting down for a glass of wine? When I hear they sit down for a glass of wine, I know that he's vapor, but that's besides the point.
And we also know from Piatti, from his side, that he's told us he's loved his time in Toronto this year. It was important for him to find a place that his family really enjoyed and his family really likes. So from that perspective, like he enjoys Toronto. So we'll see. Again, I laid out the roster spots there. I mean,
we have a question
it's tight.
From Nicholas, and it was: can teams exceed roster spots during the off season?
I don't believe so. I could be wrong about that, but I don't believe so.
I mean, Los Angeles Galaxy can, because they're the Galaxy. I remember all the articles every year that they're going into the season with 15 extra first team players, and how the hell are they going to figure it out?
So then maybe they're allowed to. I could be wrong about that, but regardless, decisions are going to have to be made, and I'll kind of relate this kind of go a little offbeat here, but this is sort of a unique time for Toronto FC because they have a lot of players that are veterans and very good players who they're paying a lot. Like the Chris Avinga, the Ozo, the Michael Bradleys, you can even throw Josie Altidore in there. But they also have they also have a lot of young up and coming talent that is very cheap on the roster. Like your homegrown players, I don't even know if they really carry a cap hit on their roster. So you'll have the likes of Jaden Nelson, the Ayo Akinolas, those guys right now before they have to get into that next contract. I think now's the time for Toronto FC to really take advantage of that because, like I said, you're not quite at that youth movement yet. You're kind of at that perfect balance where you have really, really good players, and then you have this up and coming youth movement that's cheap, and it's going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting, yeah.
Where do we get to there before I dropped offline?
I forgot. I Mitch left for a second, eh?
No, I don't know. I was just busy
my option got declined. Sorry, guys.
Oh, really? Damn.
Why don't we talk about Tony Gallacher and sort of that decision a little bit?
I don't think it was the club's decision, was it? It was.
I believe it was the club's decision because it was confirmed to me that the club did have a purchase option on Tony Gallagher's contract. But at the end of the day, I think it has to work out mutually with both Tony, Liverpool, and Toronto FC. Tony Gallacher was very candid, very open in an interview with Sky Sports where we talked about this last week. Is he hasn't stepped foot in BMO Field yet. This wasn't really the experience, and obviously it's due to the pandemic, but this wasn't really the experience that he expected when he signed with Toronto. He wasn't expecting to go play for East Hartford, right? He was expecting to live in Toronto, play in that city. So I just wonder how much that sort of played into that. Again, I think Tony Gallacher I think that's a decent loss for the club because they had him cheap. From what my understanding, he wasn't that expensive on the salary budget. And he's obviously only 21 years old, so it could have been an investment in the future. But hey, things don't work out. Again, we don't know whatever the reason it was, but his loan will be expiring at the end of the year, and he'll be returned to Liverpool.
And that's it. That's we've heard that that's it. There's no more discount. So
I mean, there's always the possibility that Liverpool decides to loan him back out in January, which he did mention, but that could be, to a different club not named Toronto FC.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's Benedict. He's saying, could exploring a second loan for Gallagher be an option? And you just answered that question. So.
Of course, yeah, it could definitely be an option, but I think some loans have to go out of Toronto FC before they can come in.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I wonder with how well Gallagher played, though, if this is something that Toronto FC try to do again, because we've seen a guy like Louis Banks over in the Montreal Impact, come out of a kind of a similar situation of the Tottenham Hotspurs academy, and it seems like these young European guys are more willing to come over here and get that professional playing time and what's proving to be a good environment and do very well in it. So I think that the success of the Gallagher move will probably mean that Toronto FC tries this again, and hopefully they can build some good relationships, because a club like Liverpool, with all the young players that they constantly need to loan out every year to get those pro minutes, that something like that could have dividends.
Absolutely. I apologize again. It looks like my fire alarm's going a little mental, but today is the day for chaos. So let's just lean into it. Yeah.
Let's quickly then. I think John's coming on momentarily here.
Yeah, I'm going to trade places here at John just because I'm going to hop off and get on that media call. But I'm sure you guys will be more than well taken care of with JMO.
Enjoy that call. I'm sure there's plenty more news coming down the line.
Looking forward to details with bated breath. I'm scared. I'm a little terrified about what's about to happen.
But Jeff, let's talk quickly about here the players they have picked up the options on. Kevin Silva, Julian Dunn, Nick DeLeon, Sebastian Endo, Frazier, Funiachi Achara, and Ayo Akinola. Achara is the one that stands out to me because, Toronto FC have, I guess, essentially already made two signings for next season. They've got Achara coming in and they've got Peruzza coming in. Both players that I'm pretty high on. The sample size is very minuscule with Achara. But with that being said, he's a player that could very well factor into, the 11 or at least the 18 heavily next season.
Yeah, I mean, judging from his strong start, I'm excited to see what he can do with a full season to play with. Now, is he he's pretty adaptable? Like, he's not just a straight center forward. He can also play on the wings, right? Achara?
Yes, yeah. I actually think that was his original position for Toronto FC. They were going to play him as a center forward. That was their plan before, obviously he went down at the MLS's back tournament. But
right.
He can be a wide threat for Toronto FC, which again is why, he could be a heavy factor next season if he can get in.
Yeah, here's hoping. I think John's here.
Yep. Yeah, we'll bring on John Molinaro now as we continue this day of chaos on the show. We are very excited to welcome a long overdue guest to Waking the Red Weekly, Director of Content for CanPL.ca, John Molinaro. Great to have you.
Hey guys,
how's it going?
Good. Anything going on today, or
just a couple of things,
Yeah. My building's exploding. So
it's no news day.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I guess let's just get your thoughts off the top here on probably the biggest bit of news. Greg Vanney departing Toronto FC and what that means for the club going forward.
Well, obviously it's a big loss, right? I mean, he was so instrumental in the sort of transformation of this club. I mean, I can't sort of overstate how much of a pardon my language shit show TFC was when he came aboard. I mean, they were the laughing stock of the league. And, I would argue, along with Michael Bradley and Tim Bezbachenko, I don't know that there's been more important people at TFC in terms of turning around not just the fortunes of the club on the field, but changing the culture at the team as well. I mean, he was hugely instrumental. And it's a sad day because, and Mitch, because you've dealt with Greg a lot. I mean, he was just generally a good guy, a very decent human being. People are going to write a lot about, the success he had on the field at TFC, and that's certainly understandable, and I don't mean to downplay it at all. But for me, what stands out the most about him was just his generosity of spirit, his kindness, and his just overall humanity. He was a good guy. I mean, I don't know that there was another coach in all of Toronto sports who was more generous with his time, more patient with reporters than he was. I mean, he would talk for as long as you want. I mean, I know other coaches in this market, are kind of looking at their watch when they're in scrums and looking to get out of there. But he would talk for as long as you want, and he would, give thoughtful, answers and really sort of engage with the media. So that's the thing, for me that really stands out about him. I mean, what it means for TFC, it's huge because now we're definitely entering a new era for the club, and that this new person has to work hand in hand with Ali Curtis as they sort of reshape and remodel the club. And I suspect there's going to be more changes at the club this offseason. So I don't think there's any question that his departure means, this is a new era and a changing of the guard, so to speak, at the club.
Damn. Yeah, testify. Yeah, indeed.
So what are some of those other challenges you think are facing the club? Obviously now they've got to get themselves a new head coach, but what are some of the other off-season priorities for Toronto FC other than the leading man, I guess?
Well, replacing Piatti as a third designated player, obviously that's sort of crucial, and they've got to figure out not just who to replace it, but how are they going to replace? I mean, do they want to go with a player of a similar profile? Do they want to go with someone younger? Do they want to go with in a different position? I mean, these are all sort of pressing questions. I think, too, I think there is a general sense amongst those of us who cover the team and even inside the organization that this is a team that has to get a little bit younger, that, there's an aging core there that are, they're not certainly on their last legs and they're certainly not over the hill, but have lost a pace and step. So this team, I think, has to inject a little bit of youth into the lineup. So that's a pressing sort of need. And I think they have to make a decision about Josie as well, because, I will raise my hand and say, I'm the biggest Josie Altidore supporter in terms of what he's meant for this club. But I don't think he can overlook, the past 2 seasons and his injury woes. And can they continue to carry on, his salary and a designated player spot with a player who you don't know if you're going to get 30 plus games from him? They may want to move him on, but is another MLS team going to sort of pick up his salary and the risk that comes with him? I don't know. So these are all sort of pressing issues for the club, but I think, for me, replacing Piatti and injecting a little bit more youth into the team are sort of the big priorities for the offseason.
Mute myself. It's no secret that you covered this team since its inception, John. Where would you rank this season on a scale of Kouverman's worst team in the world to 2017 6 on a wave treble drunk Josie speech at Nathan Phillips Square? Sorry, at whatever the hell the name of the downtown square is.
Nathan Phillips. Yeah.
Good.
It's probably, well, it's definitely not on the Danny Kouverman scale of things. It's more towards, I would say, put it on par with probably the 2016 season in which they, reached MLS Cup final, but lost it. I wouldn't put it up there with 2017 because for me that's the greatest season in not just in TFC history, but probably one of the best by any MLS team. It's kind of hard to rate because of just how strange 2020 was, right, with the pandemic and the bubble tournament and then playing abroad in Hartford and being away from their families. You can't, and the same goes for Montreal and Vancouver. They were pretty much in the same boat, but you can't sort of overstate how much of a challenge and trying this was for the coaching staff and the players to be in that situation and have to go through all that. Again, that's not an excuse for them falling short in the playoffs. And full credit to Nashville, because I thought they completely outplayed them in that game. But it did have, I think, physical and psychological effects on the team. So yeah, I mean, I think it was a successful season, but I wouldn't put it up there with 2017. That's the pinnacle of all TFC seasons, as far as I'm concerned.
Speaking of physical and mental ramifications, I mean, I keep circling back to Greg Vanney because it's a voice in my head now, and probably will be for about 4 days. But do you think we're seeing that manifest now in terms of the movement in the offseason, in terms of today's announcement?
How do you mean, Jeffrey? Sorry,
I'm grasping at straws, John. I said all of my takes are going to be hot today,
okay.
and I'm now halfway through a Belgian sour, so that was an excellent and terrible idea. But are we seeing the fallout from the Hartford experience in terms
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, it probably certainly didn't help matters, but I don't think, this was, we crashed out of the first round of the playoffs, I'm out of here, or, we crashed out of the first playoffs, let's get rid of Greg. I think, from what I've kind of talking to people, that it had been in the back of his mind somewhat throughout the season, and at least, dating back to the summer. And, it's interesting because I was actually trading messages this morning with his wife, Amy Vanni, and she said that this was a very sort of emotional week for him, to come to this decision. So, which leads me to believe that it was, again, he probably had it in the back of his mind, for a long time, but that, it just things kind of came to a fruition, most recently. I don't think the loss in Hartford had much bearing on it. I think it was just a matter of, he'd been at the helm of the team for 7 years. He'd accomplished a lot. I'm not sure there's much more else he could have done. And as he noted in his call with the media today, I mean, he's a builder. He's a guy who likes to take on projects. And, I think this project is completed as far as he's concerned. It's on to the next one. Now, whether that's going to be with LA or DC or Atlanta, or, I wouldn't rule out him possibly going abroad, because he's always talked about, he played abroad briefly in France with Bastia during his playing career. And, I remember when Jesse Marsh left New York to go coach in Austria, he kind of mentioned to me that, that's something that he possibly one day aspires to. So, whether he gets opportunities, I don't know, but that wouldn't be something I would entirely rule out. But again, I don't think the loss in Hartford, I don't think necessarily that was the tipping point or contributed to it in any major way.
Now, how do you? Oh, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. How do you sell that to a TFC fan? I mean, you just said Greg's a builder, and I think the process here in Toronto at TFC is over. How do you sell that to a fan base, especially coming off the back of our first exit in the first round since 2015, which was, an absolute buzzkill. I mean, getting trounced by the Impact off the back of Seba's wonder goal was a really low point. So it's hard. We're all speaking in platitudes right now, and I'm going to spend a week apologizing for all of my hot takes today. But how do you sell that? I can't not see that as negative. Like when the words left your mouth, it just the gray cloud formed over my head. Right? Yeah. You're putting an end date on this wonderful adventure that we've all been experiencing, and I don't like it. So, where do we go from here? Like, how do we spin this as a positive? Because right now it just seems all crazy bad for me, So
again, I mean, it is a big loss for the club. I mean, how you sort of sell it is, I think how you sell it is that Greg has left, despite the loss in Hartford and the first round exit, I think he leaves the team and organization in very good shape. There are certainly tweaks to be made in the offseason. Don't get me wrong. And we talked about them earlier, what with, replacing Piatti and having to, figure out what they want to do with Josie, if anything, and inject some youth in the team, to say nothing of the matter that they've got to make decisions on guys like Justin Morrow and Laurent Simon and Eric Zavaleta and a few others. But I mean, overall, I think this team, he's left the team in a very good shape. I think there's a good sort of foundation there. And, when you look at sort of a lot of the young players that are there already, be it Liam Fraser or Akinola or Jaden Nelson, they came up through Vanni. Now you can argue that he should have played them a little bit more, and I'm certainly sympathetic to those sort of arguments. But there's a good core of veterans and a good core of emerging young talent there that could be the centerpiece and the cornerstones of that franchise for a long time. So yes, it's a sad occasion, and again, I don't think there's any question that this is an end of an era with Greg going. And all things being equal, I think the organization and TFC fans in general would like to have Greg Vanney still at the helm of the team. But it's not a dark day. I mean, I think there is plenty of positives going on at the club, and while they are in need of some sort of tweaks and changes during the offseason, I still think the club is in a good place to go forward.
Well, yeah, we can talk about Toronto FC all day, but there obviously is another massive story in Canadian soccer today with Forge FC on the brink of qualifying for the Concacaf Champions League. What would that mean for the league and for Canadian soccer this early on in the process? I don't think any of us expected a team to be this close from the Canadian Premier League this quickly.
Yeah, I think it would be a massive moment, not just for Forge and not just for the Canadian Premier League, but for Canadian soccer. I mean, you got to remember, this is a league that is essentially 2 years old, and Forge was, formed just shortly before the launch of the league. So to go from that to not even having a team, 2 or 3 years ago, to now being on the cusp of qualifying for the most prestigious club competition in Concacaf, it's pretty mind-boggling when you think about it. And the fact that the manner in which they've done it, gotten to this point, is what's kind of impressed me. I mean, they had the grueling sort of island games where they were under in the bubble tournament, had to come home and quarantine, then travel to El Salvador and went on the road there, then come home and quarantine, then go down to Panama and beat Tauro FC, who are, I would suggest one of the better teams in Central America. Went down there, come back home. Now they're back down in the Dominican Republic, and they have to play a team from Haiti. Just sort of the run that they've been on and how they've done is what's been really sort of awe-striking for me, doing it. So yeah, I think it's a major boon for Canadian soccer if they can do this. I think it just shows how much the game is growing in Canada and how much the league has kind of grown in a short period of time and the standard of play. I mean, if you had told me, last April when Forge and York 9 FC played to a 1-1 draw in the CPL's inaugural game, that in 2 years, one of them would be playing in the Concacaf Champions League. I mean, I would have looked at you like you were crazy. But the fact that it is happening, I think, just speaks to the strength of the league, its commitment to giving Canadian talent opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise, and giving young Canadian talent opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise. I mean, you look at this team, obviously, yeah, there's guys like David Edgar and Kyle Becker, but there's also young talent like David Chouanier and Anthony Novak and Jonathan Grant and Dom Samuel and so many others. So I think it just speaks to, the CPL's commitment to, really developing Canadian talent.
Absolutely.
You've mentioned that there have been kind of unique challenges in every game so far in this CONCACAF League process. What are some of them you see going in today's game against Arakai? Because I think potentially this might be the first time where Forge is, sort of considered the favorites. They certainly weren't against the Tauro team that, has a pretty good legacy in CONCACAF, and potentially against Lemenio. But, that in itself kind of brings some challenges as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's, again, I don't think the challenges are all that much different from the previous two ones, other than, they've had to, after winning in Tauro, they had to go home. They had to quarantine for 14 days before they could even train together. They did that for a few days, then traveled down to Santo Domingo and train down there and play a team that, frankly, they don't know a terrible amount about. They won their first round game by default because I think the team from Belize, withdrew because of COVID-19 testing. And they've only had one game in this competition, and they have played a lot of domestic games in Haiti. But again, it's hard to scout a team that there's very little information on, and you can't do a terrible amount of scouting on. I mean, I searched hard, far and wide, and I couldn't even find like an official Twitter page or Facebook page for the coaching club. So you can just imagine how difficult it must have been to get game video. So I think that presents probably the biggest challenge for Forge. I'm not sure I think they have a sense of who Arkai is, but not really sort of generally specifics about the team.
I mean, we were able to purchase Lamino kits, so I have no. Like,
were they great kits too?
Yeah. It's man, I just wish I had the shorts and the socks. The socks. Let's be honest, the socks. I'm gonna circle back because would you say that the performances of CPL teams in Concacaf competitions has been the biggest surprise of the CPL in year 3, going into year 3?
I think it's certainly one of them. Yeah, I mean, again, I certainly didn't expect Forge to get this far, only because it's such a young team, and the fact that they had to play on the road for all these games. I mean, when you look at their Concacaf League run last year, which was impressive too, when they reached the round of 16, both of their wins came at Tim Hortons Field. They didn't win down in Guatemala, and they got trounced by Olympia in Honduras. So, when the bracket was announced and I kind of saw their path and the fact that they weren't going to play any home games, I certainly thought this is going to be a tough one, because going down and getting results in Central America for any team, is tough. To have to do it 2 or 3 times in a row is going to be incredibly difficult, especially after the coming off the Island Games, which they won, no doubt, but that wasn't sort of exactly smooth sailing either, because of the circumstances around what's going on in the world. So yeah, I mean, that's certainly sort of surprise. That was I think one of the biggest surprises from the CPL. I think the other thing was just how just how even the Island Games were. I mean, other than Edmonton, you had all the teams going into the final day kind of still in contention for a Final Four spot, and to see, I'm a big HFX fan just because I love the city. I've been to Halifax a few times, and I think it's just a wonderful city with wonderful people. But to see them go from last place to reaching the CPL finals, I mean, I knew that they were going to be significantly better than 2019. I mean, couldn't get much worse, but I certainly didn't see sort of this incredible turnaround to the extent that they enjoyed. And full credit to Stephen Hart. I mean, he put together a really impressive squad, and I think he's retained a lot of these players for next year. So I think the core of that team is going to be in place for at least for the next several years. So I mean, Forge's run, and I think just the overall competitive nature of how even and competitive the Island Games were probably the 2 biggest surprises for me this year.
Okay, and then on the flip side of that, taking COVID off the table, because that's obviously going to be the answer, what do you think is the league's biggest challenge going into year 3?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I got to think about that. I mean, it's obviously the COVID thing is huge, right? Because I mean, we don't know if there's going to be the league is fully committed to playing a season next year. But how is that going to look like, and when is that going to even take place and whatnot? I mean, those are all important questions. If I were to, aside from that, I think that maybe one of the bigger challenges is just getting more relevancy. I mean, this is still a young league that, we try our best at the league website to tell the stories of the players and the teams and to sort of do good storytelling. And, guys like yourselves, and there's a few others who sort of pitch in that regard as well. But I think, the mainstream media still hasn't entirely kind of picked up on it. There are pieces here and there in the Canadian media. I think the Island Games was generally well received by Canadian sports media. But
absolutely.
I think just kind of getting more and more sort of media sort of coverage, becoming more relevant in that scape. I'd love it to see, the commissioner David Clanahan on like Tim and Sid or on Jay and Dan or something like that. I mean, I think we're we haven't seen that yet. So I think just getting more sort of media, being more relevant in the Canadian sports market would probably be, I think, one of the challenges facing the league going forward.
And it's such a slippery slope, right? Because you're anting up indie credibility, whatever that means, the more mainstream you get. So it's always you always gotta do you want to be the Beatles or the Rolling Stones? I mean, those are the question that we ask ourselves all the time.
I'd rather be the Rolling Stones personally.
See, I'd rather be the Beatles because I think it's difficult to write a song that everybody, regardless of social status or even language ability, can instantly get lodged in their cortex, right?
Hey, Gallagher and Richards was a great songwriting duo. I'll have you know.
Oh yeah. But I mean, you also have to forget all the blues they were ripping off. But that's another story altogether.
Before we go too deep down the music rabbit hole, because I feel like we could. I did just quickly before you leave, John, here, want to ask you about David Edgar and the announcement yesterday that he'll be retiring from professional soccer. How big of a loss is that for Forge, and what legacy does he leave as a Canadian soccer player who played in the Premier League, scored against Manchester United, has had quite a long and storied career for both clubs and country as well?
It's a big loss. He was a tremendous player, both for national team and for at club level when he was playing in England. I thought it was a major coup when Bobby Smyrniona signed him last summer, and that really kind of bolstered their roster and I think solidified things at the back. And when you look at it, he played something like, I think 24 or 26 games in all competitions since then, logged over 2,000 minutes. I mean, I think him and Daniel Crutzen were really sort of the heart of that defense and played massive parts, in their success. So it's a big loss. I mean, beside his sort of pedigree and, his sort of obvious quality and reputation, I think he just kind of set a very high standard for those around him, right? I mean, you have to remember that a lot of Forges players are young guys, and some of them are playing professionally for the first time. And to be able to sort of train and be a teammate of someone like David Edgar, who has played at the highest level and played in the Premier League against Cristiano Ronaldo and Wayne Rooney and scored big goals in some of the biggest, parks in English football, that had a huge impact on Forge's young players. So I think just his commitment, his drive, his will to win, and sort of the high standards of excellence that he set, for his teammates were massive for Forge. And this is a big blow for the team because they're losing a player who, I mean, hey, he's 33. I mean, this is still a relatively young man who, all things being equal, if he wasn't having sort of knee problems, could probably continue on to play for this team and be the foundation of it for a long time. So this is a big blow. This is someone that they have to go out and replace. So it's a loss for Forge. It's a loss for the CPL. I think it's just a loss for Canadian soccer. I mean, he was such a loyal servant to the Canadian men's team all these years. And I mean, you have to remember he was playing at a time, and to this day too, when a lot of Canadians abroad, playing in Europe, when they tell their teams in Europe that they have to go home to play, in a Concacaf game, they get looked at with very jaundiced eyes, right? I mean, they get so much abuse. I can tell a quick story. I remember Craig Forrest telling me once that, during the Concacaf Gold Cup, which obviously Canada won, he was playing at West Ham at the time, and that Harry Redknapp kept calling him because West Ham was going through a goalkeeping crisis, begging him to come home. And he said, well, Harry, I'm winning. Like, we're going to the final. And Harry's like, well, how long is this thing? Like, when is this over? So you can just imagine, that was, 20 years ago. You can just imagine how much pressure, Canadian players like Alphonso Davies and so many others really get pressured not to leave and go on an international break. It'd be one thing if they were playing for Spain or, Germany, Italy, but to go play for Canada, with all due respect, probably something that, they're not too thrilled about. So, but David did it, and I'm sure it was much to the detriment of his career at the time, but he did it gladly. This was someone who was, proudly Canadian and who was, fiercely loyal servant to the Canadian national team. So it's a big loss for the national team program as well, I would say.
To David Edgar. Also, yeah. I don't know if that was jaundice or urine in their eyes, John.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same. It's the same shade, and I'm gonna. Exactly. You, Mitch, you wanted to ask about the Voyageurs Cup, the 2021.
Oh yeah, that's actually a good point. Just quickly,
that's what I'm here for, Val. Hot takes. And
there you go. Yeah,
hot takes
your thoughts on the Voyageurs Cup being moved to 2021, and I guess mostly how important it is that game between Toronto FC and Forge actually does get played, because there have been some suggestions that it might not, considering, what Forge could do tonight to qualify automatically. But I still think it, for Canadian soccer, for the Canadian Premier League, it's important that game does get played.
Oh, absolutely, Mitch. I agree with you 100%. I mean, it's I have to be perfectly honest. I'm not the biggest fan of domestic cup competitions. Like, I don't get all teary-eyed about the FA Cup. I mean, I'm a big Juventus supporter, and when they win the Coppa Italia, I don't go all crazy.
Because they always win the Coppa Italia.
The Coppa del Rey is okay because you get to see Barcelona and Real Madrid play sometimes, but I'm not one for domestic cups. But truly and honestly, I say this in all sincerity, the Voyageurs Cup is the one domestic cup competition that I really, really enjoy. I mean, I think it's just produced some entertaining, dramatic soccer games and some results over the years. So I think it's vitally important that the game gets played, even though it's not going to be played in 2020, even though potentially Forge is already going to qualify for the Champions League tonight. It's still an important part of Canadian soccer culture. It's still an important game, and I think we need it now more than ever, especially what's going on with the world, right? And with the pandemic, we've lost so much that to write it off and say, let's not bother playing it. It wouldn't be the right move. So I'm really glad and thankful that Canada Soccer took the decision to and seem committed to playing it, even if it means taking place in 2021.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I think it would be a shame to not play it. I mean, who knows who's coaching TFC? Who knows who's playing for TFC at that juncture?
Well, it's interesting to know that the new TFC coach, I mean, potentially that's going to be their first game in charge, right? So isn't that like a big decision, even more so?
Oh, for sure. I'll just I won't eat all day long, and I'll try not to swallow my own heart. But that's besides the point.
But thank you so much, John, for taking time on this.
Thank you so much,
busy
John.
day in Canadian soccer and coming on.
No problem, Tom. Anytime, guys.
Yeah,
cheers.
Absolutely. Definitely have you back. Well, so what are we thinking? Toronto FC, Forge FC, Voyageurs Cup final, Bobby Smirnionis coaching Toronto FC. Can you imagine?
That would just, I mean, give me a few days. Give me a few days to get there, because I need to wash the stank of this morning off. And has Michael said anything about what's happening with the latest announcements, or is that just going to be a fun thing that we revisit later?
Yeah, probably a fun thing we revisit later. I haven't. I've been trying to respectfully scroll through Twitter during all this, and haven't seen anything I consider too wild yet. So we'll leave that for the after show. But I did want to one final thing on our rundown, and this would be probably the leading news on most weeks' shows.
You're gonna do it, aren't you? You're gonna do it.
Yeah, I want one last bit of Jeff hot takery, because I think this is worth it. The announcement that Ayo Akinola has been called up to the United States national team for a friendly against El Salvador. Of course, playing in this game would not mean he's cap-tied. He could just be window shopping, but as we all know, that's not a great sign for the Canadian men's national team system that he accepted a call from the U.S.
Well, I mean, Mitch, you explained to me. I came back an hour after and said, "Hey, wait, it's like summer camp. He's not going to get cap-tied," and your response was, "He gone." So I'd like you to explain how you know this definitively.
I don't know it definitively. That's fair. My thinking is just that, Akinola's always talked about his national team career like it's something where he's going to make a decision at some point. He's clearly taken a while to make this decision. Some of that's been the fact that, for a while he wasn't a good enough player that either national team was heavily considering him to be called into camp, or at least wasn't getting the opportunity to prove that he was that player. So I think that clearly factored into it. But with that being said, I do think he took enough time now and talked to both national team setups that I would think that once he's made a decision, he's made a decision. Just everything I've heard about the situation and everything, he said about that, I don't really see him flip-flopping back and forth. So
do you think he's window shopping? Do you think that he's just going to get some minutes in training because the Canadian men's national team doesn't have a fixture until the year 3047?
It sounds like Canada's actually going to play potentially Panama in a couple of games in January. Panama's FA has been pretty vocal about that, even if Canada's FA never will be, but which could be interesting in its own right.
Armando Cooper.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I forget.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reunion of Oso and Armando Cooper. But
listen, how do I feel about it?
Yeah.
Horrible, horrifying. Listen, at the end of the day, soccer's a business. Everybody makes business decisions. I'm not in his camp. I'm not a soccer player. But wow, what kind of massive balls do you need to have to commit to the U.S. men's national team as a young player, not the opposite, where Bradders and Josie came here and saw what Canada has to offer, but what massive balls you would have to do that and still play for TFC. Do you know what I mean? Like that is opening up a box of Pandora's whoop ass as far as I'm concerned.
I guess you asked me last night why I wasn't more angry or fired up about this.
Because you love Kyle Larin for some strange reason.
That is part of it. I do think Canada's in a good place when it comes to the striker position. With that being said, I still think Ayo Akinola is a great player who would be in contention for starting with Canada. I'm not gonna dismiss Akinola at all in that sense, but I just never thought he was going to pick Canada. I mean, he's played with the U.S. his entire time. As optimistic as Canada was, when they asked Greg Berhalter about Ayo Akinola, his response was, well, he's still a U.S. player to us, which made me think he has all of the confidence in the world that he's going to stay with the United States.
Yes, Charlie, I seriously just said a box of Pandora's whoop ass. I was looking for something wittier, but I got nothing. So
no, that's still an all-timer. But
oh, really? Good. So
I love that. But yeah, I'm just I don't know, for some reason I never really believed truly that Ayo Akinola was going to play for Canada. So I think I moved on before the decision was actually made.
I did because he's Canadian. Not only is he Canadian, but he's from Brampton. So if anybody realizes what we're building here, it should be Ayo Akinola. And so I consider it an insult to national pride. And I know that that's horribly emotive, and I'm not going to apologize for that. I consider it an affront to what we're trying to build here. I consider it opportunistic. And by virtue of that, I find it difficult to trust the player, right? When the chips are down, you show people who you really are. And, I reserve judgment. Let's see what this non-cap type training camp, non-camp thing ends up being. And I agree with you that the more noise he makes, the worse it reflects on him. You can't keep, what I mean? Even Messi, I don't know if Messi was able to play for anybody but Argentina, but even a player of Messi's stature, if he had made it that much about themselves and what they're going to choose, eventually you burn everybody out and they're like, whatever, play with us or don't. But I can't, Owen Hargreaves.
Yeah, and I hope Canada does take this as an insult. I hope the national team and everyone like that. I mean, I think we're past the years on waiting for guys like this. I know you never close doors, and you're always kind of trying to recruit guys. I know, for example, Ricardo Ferreira, who still for some reason thinks he's going to play for Portugal, even though he's had like 6 near career-ending injuries to his knees. I think you never close doors in national team, but I think you call guys up who want to be there, and I think
Absolutely.
Canada has guys who have both the quality and now the desire to really pull on that shirt and do something for Canada. I think they showed that against the United States. I think they've showed that in a lot of recent games. And if Ayo's not one of those guys, then you know what? Thanks.
Move on. Thank you for your service. I agree with you on that. I do not want people that are settling for it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want people to put on that badge, to put on that Nike Dry Fit red monstrosity and play their hearts out. You know
Jeff,
what I mean?
I was trying to get free kits. What are you doing here?
Okay, the best red kit I've ever seen.
There we go.
By a brand called Nike. Whatever, they were gonna give us free kits anyway.
Yeah,
whatever. I can still get them. Don't worry, I'm charming.
But yeah, no, Canada. I mean, look, we could. I still think we have a very good opportunity to qualify for 2022. We have a home World Cup in 2026. I want 11 guys on the field who are incredibly proud to play for Canada.
And you made a very good point. We're what, 7 deep in forward depth?
Mm-hmm. And I didn't mention other guys. I mean, you got Tesho Akindele, who you can throw in there, who's been on the periphery of the national team camp just because of these other guys.
Superstar Kyle Larin. Kyle Larin.
Exactly. There's a lot of young guys who are in and around that national team setup who, a lot of young guys coming up. So while this is, don't get me wrong, this is a loss. This would be a big loss for Canada if we don't get Ayo Akinola. It doesn't hurt the way it would have hurt in previous generations.
It's a fair statement. Fair. I mean, he's going to walk into the U.S. team because they've got Josie and Will Sargent and Jassy Zardes, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, here's another question: Is he the atypical Berhalter center forward, or will Berhalter have to change his game plan for Ayo's strength and his?
I'll be honest here. I don't know too much about the U.S. men's national team other than under Greg Berhalter, other than that they lose a lot. So,
well, also that roving six, that weirdo. He's done it in all of his teams.
Yeah.
That weirdo six that kind of is a second striker or also plays goal, which is fantastic. But
yeah.
All right.
We should probably bring things to the end there. I think Jeff's got a few more Belgian sours he's got to work on here.
I got a bottle for you, Mitch. You're gonna love this stuff.
Absolutely. Not sure where Michael's at or the other Toronto FC news that might be coming out in the next little bit, but
we're here for you next week. Yeah, we're 0-10 in predictions league, by the way. Thanks, Kevin. Who forgot to do the last round of the prediction league? 0 for 10. What are you, Kev? What are you?
Tough. At any rate, the MLS season will keep going on, so we'll talk about the rest of the MLS playoffs. There's so much that will be happening over the next little bit. Obviously awesome to have John Molinaro on.
Awesome.
There's the Greg father, but the real TFC godfather is JMO. So
can he coach? Do you think he can coach?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe we found Vanni's replacement there.
Fresh apartment balcony basil during halftime for snacks.
Michael's watching somewhere and he's like, "This is exactly how I expected the outro to go." And it was Jeff and Mitchell. Just a 20
we don't want to stop because then I'll just start crying. So
yeah, we'll have to deal with that. But yeah, head over to Waking the Red. We'll have all kinds of coverage of Greg Vanney, of today's Forge FC game, all kinds of content over there. On behalf of Michael and Jeff, thank you so much for watching this long, crazy episode that we had today.
Next Tuesday, we're gonna be right back, wrapping up more TFC news.
Yeah. If we know anything about Toronto FC, it's that one domino, brings several others. So.
Just sign Fabregas. Just make me happy. Sign Fabregas. God damn it! I want Cesc Fabregas on my team. God damn it! Just give me my.
Need to get Michael on just to let me wrap this thing. Not just yell you for me.
All right, I'm done.
But if you do like the show, head over to iTunes, give us a rating. Otherwise, until next Tuesday, let's see what else is in store for us over this next week.
Buckle up, kiddos. Cheers.